Sometimes I like to poke fun, about all those Russian-speaking blockheads who say nonsense and utter ridiculous stupidities. And I want to say right away that some do it out of their own stupidity and foolishness, while others do it because, well, they really love money. And the more the better. That's a normal human condition. Well, just now I was sent a link to an absolutely outstanding video which stands out like a Himalayan peak of nonsense on the plane of nonsense spoken by Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking bloggers, journalists, and other politicians. Believe me, it's a gift. And her gift is called Snezhana Yegorova. She calls herself Snezhnaya Lavina Yegorova. And Snezhnaya Lavina really loves apples. Bright and beautiful things, and bright and beautiful things aren't cheap. I'll tell you later about her, I think last video, which is called The Fourth U-Reich. Yeah, you heard right. Not the Fourth Reich, but the Fourth U-Reich. A wonderful girl, insanely funny and not at all stupid, but very vile and loathsome. I would even say a vile, loathsome creature. Just to make my attitude toward her absolutely clear. I recommend not to miss it. It's something special. This could even be shown to grandchildren as an example of what an anti-Semite is and how they differ from people. Because outwardly, they look very much like people. Yes, before I forget, there's one more important topic. There are a huge number of fakes circulating on the internet claiming that Canada made agreements with Japan and took over, basically stole from the United States, the industries Japan was planning to set up, because Canada, it is said, entered into some other kind of relationship with China, and now they will supposedly act together, Canada and China, against the United States of America. Gentlemen, no, the leadership of Canada and the leadership of Japan are not idiots. No, they are not idiots. One of them subscribes to, so to speak, a different ideology, not the one that we adhere to, not the one we like. So, someone is doing something that, let's say we wouldn't want. We thought it should be done, but they haven't gone crazy. No. That's why you should use your critical thinking, and you'll immediately understand that for Japan or Canada, this would be the height of idiocy. Well, what trolls and all kinds of bots, both mechanical and biological, are attributing to them would amount to national suicide. You have to distinguish between them. So there's no need to get nervous. Just don't. With either country, with both. With the other country, the USA, everything is absolutely fine for us. Well, there are all sorts of disagreements, shouting, growling, and so on. But in reality, everything is absolutely fine. But we'll start with a truly remarkable document that the White House has just released in accordance with the requirements of American law. The document describes what the White House considers its biggest and most important achievements over the past year. That is, the first year of Donald Trump's administration. Let's begin. They tell you Trump is the savior of America. Or they tell you Trump is a threat to democracy. What is this? Propaganda, truth, half-truth? Let's figure it out together. But let's not figure it out with emotions or poorly grounded judgments, but through the lens of science, the science of freedom. There is such a science, and it is a science. Like geography. Like geometry, like physics, a science. So, what did the administration actually do in the first full year, without rose-colored glasses, without hysteria, like scientists, not like agitators? So, as someone once said, as our first cosmonaut, what was his name? Gagarin. Yes, Gagarin said, "Let's go." And then we were told that at that moment he waved his hand. April 13, 2026, the Council of Economic Advisors. There is such a council at the White House. Published the President's Economic Report. While it covers more than just the economy, that's its official name. So, 14 chapters. That's more than 200 pages. These aren't advertising brochures, not an election manifesto. This is official. It's what's called the administration's self-assessment, a document that became mandatory in 1946 according to the law of the United States of America. And that's exactly why it's so valuable to us. Here, the administration itself says what it considers its main achievements. We won't retell this entire document. It's 200 pages, right? My task is different. to filter its main points through the lens of the science of freedom, because a fact by itself, well, doesn't mean anything. There's a number, GDP. But how do you know? Is it good, bad, more, less, and so on? The percentage of deregulation. What does that mean to you? The number of signed executive orders. Maybe someone signed 2,000 decrees and all of them are about renaming bridges. All these are empty numbers until we ask the main question. And what is the main question? Does this, well, everything they've done for a whole year actually contribute to human freedom? Or does it limit it? Will this increase property, primary property, like life and secondary property, the products of one's labor, or does it take it away? And actually, this kind of assessment is the only criterion that matters, and everything else is just noise. I'll go through 8 sections. So 7 real achievements that would be supported by Adam Smith, Ludwig von Mises, and Friedrich Hayek. The 8th is what the administration presents as a success, but from the perspective of the science of freedom, it raises serious objections. We will be honest in everything. So, number 1. The second chapter of the economic report is entirely devoted to deregulation. Tens of thousands of pages of federal regulations have been repealed. Hundreds of directives from various agencies have been withdrawn. Entire programs have been eliminated. According to the administration's estimates, the savings for the private sector amount to hundreds of billions of dollars a year. I'll be straightforward. This is just common sense, an important achievement of the first year. More important than taxes, more important than trade policy, more important than anything else. I'll explain to you why right now. Friedrich Hayek, in his Nobel lecture in 1974, spoke about the fatal conceit, about how a central planner can never gather all the knowledge that is dispersed throughout society among millions of people. Every regulation is an attempt by a single bureaucrat, say in Washington or Brussels or somewhere else, to replace the decisions of millions of people on the ground. The bureaucrat is not stupid. Why? The task is, in principle, unsolvable, that's all. Knowledge is decentralized by its very nature, so a top-down decision, one-size-fits-all, is unnatural. Ludwig von Mises said, "It's even simpler. The government is an instrument of coercion. It doesn't have its own economic rationality. All it can do is distort market signals." When you reduce regulation, you're not introducing chaos, you're restoring order. That very spontaneous order that Hayek called cosmos, as opposed to constructed order. Golambas would add, deregulation is an intrusion into a person's primary property. On his time, on his energy, on his life, his secondary property. It's about the product of his labor. Deregulation is not a gift to business. It's the return of property to its rightful owner. Legally, he has always been the owner. In fact, it was taken away from him, and now it's been returned. Let's look at the specifics. Biden's EPA demanded almost the impossible from car manufacturers. By 2032, 2/3 of new car sales would have to be electric vehicles. This isn't environmental protection, it's a Soviet Gospelin order. It means producing this many ears of grain by a certain deadline. The cancellation of this rule is not a climate disaster. Returning the decision to where it belongs, to the consumer. If I want to buy this kind, I buy this kind. If I want to buy that kind, I buy that kind. Whether 2/3 buy them or half or 1/10. The market will decide, the consumer will decide. If you want an electric car, buy it. If you want gasoline, buy it. The government shouldn't tell you what to do. It's the same in dozens of other industries, from construction to pharmaceuticals, from energy to agriculture. Every repealed order, every repealed regulation is a small victory for freedom. You should remember this because it's the foundation of everything else. The first chapter of the report is dedicated to the big, beautiful law, a large-scale tax cut for working families. Extension and deepening of the 2017 reforms, new deductions, simplification of the code. In his essay, What is Seen and What is Not Seen, Bastiat wrote one of the most significant phrases in the entire history of economic thought. The state is a great fiction, by means of which everyone tries to live at the expense of someone else. Taxation is the instrument of this fiction. Every dollar for the state is not a voluntary contribution to the common cause. It is a dollar taken under threat of violence from the one who earned it and given to someone who didn't earn it. Well, sometimes this can be justified. Yes, the army, the courts, border security. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, this is not justified. Milton Friedman formulated the main law of the budget, the 4 ways to spend money. The first way: you spend your own money on yourself. Here you pay the most attention to both quality and price, right? You're buying for yourself. Whether it's a service, an item, goods, or something else, you pay attention to both quality and price. The second way: your own money on others. There's already less attention to quality. Well, a gift is a gift. There's still attention to the price. Method 3. Other people's money on yourself. Price no longer matters. One pays, another benefits. Quality matters. Method 4. Spending other people's money on others. You don't care at all about the price or the quality, right? Every tax cut moves dollars from the fourth mode to the first. This is not just economic policy. This is the restoration of moral order. Critics will argue this will increase the deficit. Well, answer calmly. The deficit, ladies and gentlemen, is the result of spending, not the result of low taxes. There was no need to spend so much on who knows what. First, cut spending, then argue about taxes. I disagree. Actually, he's not defending the budget. He's defending the power of the government to spend taxpayers' money wherever they want. An American worker who kept an extra $1,000 a year for himself, that's not lost tax revenue. That's a family that was able to buy new shoes for their kids, fix the roof, or save for retirement. That's what freedom looks like in concrete material terms. Chapter 4 of the report. About energy dominance. Here I have to be honest. I really don't like the word dominance. To dominate or not to dominate doesn't matter at all. The free market isn't about dominance, it's about production and voluntary exchange. But if you strip away the propaganda and look at the essence of what's been done, it's a huge step toward freedom. What was it like under Biden? It was basically a declaration of war on our own energy sector. A ban on new drilling on federal lands, refusal to approve pipelines, endless environmental studies that dragged on for decades, administrative strangulation of the nuclear industry. None of this is about protecting nature. This is the strangling of an economic sector in the name of ideological dogma. What has the current administration done? It has removed artificial barriers. It restored permits, opened up federal lands, accelerated procedures, gave the green light to new small-scale nuclear reactors. It's been tested many times. The result is clear. America is the largest producer of oil and gas in the world, truly, not just because of statistical tricks. Now comes the decisive philosophical moment. Adam Smith in 1776, exactly 250 years ago, wrote, "The wealth of a nation is measured not by the gold in its treasury, but by the productivity of its citizens." Before him, no one had even thought along those lines. And the productivity of citizens depends on the cost of energy. Cheap energy means cheap production. Cheap logistics, cheap food, cheap heating in winter, and air conditioning in summer. Cheap internet because servers consume electricity. Cheap healthcare because hospitals run on energy around the clock. Cheap science because laboratories consume enormous amounts of power. And expensive energy means poverty. Simple, material, harsh poverty. And when the government artificially makes energy expensive in the name of some abstract green idea, it creates poverty. Poverty for whom? For those who already have little. Because a billionaire, even someone who has just $100 million, will survive a threefold increase in electricity prices, but a single mother won't. Bastiat would have written a satirical petition today. A petition from wind turbine manufacturers to the government calling on the government to ban the sun because it unfairly competes with the wind. Absurd? But that's exactly the point of the green lobby, to ban competition from real energy sources in favor of politically favored ones that we subsidize. We give them subsidies. The liberation of the energy sector is the third fundamental achievement. It is not finished yet. The work continues. The 10th chapter of the report is dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. It doesn't just criticize this policy, it quantifies its cost as a percentage of GDP. The administration claims that the imposed policy, called DEI, that is, hiring not based on competence but on racial, gender, and other quotas, costs the American economy hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Ayn Rand built her entire philosophy around one principle: individual merit. A complete unit of value, the author of their actions, the master of their decisions. He should be judged by what he has done, not by the group he has been assigned to. Agreement. DEI is a return to the most organic form of tribal thinking. The group a person belongs to by birth determines their place. The form is different, but the essence is the same. In India, it was called the caste system. In Europe, feudalism. In the USSR, class purity. I think, yes, class purity. In Nazi Germany, it was called racial hygiene. In all these systems, a person was not an individual, but a representative of the collective. His fate. DEI does the same thing. Instead of bourgeois son, in America it became white man. Instead of son of a kulak or from a kulak family, it's representative of a privileged group. The names change. The mechanics are identical. The mechanics are exactly the same. When I came here to America and told people what it was like in the Soviet Union, people around me laughed, right? First they're laughing, now they're crying. Galambus called it a violation of primary property. When you're judged not by who you are, but by the group you've been assigned to, your individuality has been taken away from you. You've been turned into a statistical unit, and a statistical unit has no rights. It has quotas. The cancellation of DEI is not a step backward, as progressives are shouting. It's a step forward, a giant one. This is what Martin Luther King dreamed of in 1963, to judge a person not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, by their personal qualities. Modern leftists have rejected King's words. The administration has restored them. This is a striking ideological shift, and the economic consequences are predictable. By the way, a company that hires the best candidate, not just someone who fits a quota, is more productive. It sells at a lower price. It pays its employees more. Everyone wins, including those whom DEI supposedly protected. Because a black engineer hired for competence knows that he is an engineer. A black engineer hired through a quota doesn't know that either. In fact, no one knows. We always got nervous when we were told, "There's a doctor over there. Did you see he's black?" Who knows? Maybe he got here through a quota. We'd better go with some Asian guy. They're definitely not hired through quotas. It's called meritocracy when things are based on merit. It restores dignity. That's its main function, including money, but money is secondary. Chapter 13 quantitatively assesses the GDP losses from the distortion of capital allocation towards environmentally responsible investments. ESG is an abbreviation for environmental, social, and governance. The idea is simple and I would say insidious. Investment funds, under government directive, must allocate capital not where it brings the highest profit, but where it meets the political and ideological criteria of the country's leadership. In other words, our party. Oil is bad, weapons are bad, and then, depending on the mood, wind turbines are good. Companies with the right percentage of women on the board are good, and so on. Ludwig von Mises, in 1922 in his book Socialism, proved a theorem that socialists have not recovered from to this day. It's called the economic calculation problem. Here's what it means. In the economy, there are millions of goods, millions of resources, and millions of possible combinations. How do you determine which combination is optimal? The only way is through the price system, which is formed in the process of voluntary exchange. Price is a signal. It says there's a shortage here, send resources here, there's a surplus here, take resources from here. Without prices, rational calculation is impossible. You just don't know what's more important, what's more valuable. And actually, you don't even know where society needs more. ESG is an attempt to replace the price signal with a political one. Data comes from above, from the center. Point straight ahead, over there, so that's where the sun rises or sets. It doesn't matter. Somewhere. We're all going over there. Someone who would have invested in a profitable oil company is forced to invest in an unprofitable solar one. Because those are the rules of the game, and I can predict the result. Capital flows to where it is less productive, not to where it yields more and is more productive. Profitable companies don't get investments. They're not trendy today. They're not in line with party discipline. Unprofitable ones do. Society becomes poorer. Retirees lose returns on their retirement accounts because their 401k retirement accounts are invested not where it's profitable, but where the government says is politically correct. The administration exposed this mechanism and evaluated it as a percentage of GDP. This is a huge intellectual and political achievement. If Mises were alive, he would have written this chapter's foreword. And here is what can be understood. Rejecting ESG does not mean prohibiting anyone from investing in environmentally friendly ways. Please invest wherever you want, in any solar companies, wind farms. Rejecting ESG means something else. The government no longer forces others to invest the same way you do or someone else does. This is a return to freedom. A simple, pure, straightforward return to freedom. I'm going to combine two chapters of the report here, the 11th and the 12th, because philosophically they're about the same thing, about the financial and medical freedom of the average American. The 11th chapter is about expanding competition in the healthcare market, simplifying licensing, allowing nurses and physician assistants to perform more procedures independently, abolishing certificates of need. It's an absolutely absurd system where, in order to open a new clinic, you have to prove to the government that the clinic is needed. Like the government knows better than patients what they need. But you open it, nobody comes, you close it. Milton Friedman spent his whole life proving a simple thing. American healthcare is so expensive not because the medicine is bad, but because the regulation is bad. Doctors are united in a cartel, the American Medical Association, which artificially limits the number of doctors to keep prices high. Insurance companies are another cartel, and pharmaceutical companies are a third. All these cartels work with the government in a system that Mises called interventionism. This is not capitalism, this is not socialism, this is a third way. Who dreamed about that? Mussolini, and along with him the beloved president of the Bolshevik Party, also known as the Democrats, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The third way. It's the worst of all possible options. It's just a combination of the worst features of each system. The Trump administration started to untangle this knot. They haven't fully untangled it yet and won't in one term, but they've started, which is important. And Chapter 12 is about ordinary Americans' access to private capital through retirement accounts. Until now, private capital, venture funds, and direct investments were only available to accredited investors. Why? But what if I want to invest my $100 or $100,000 or, I don't know, $32,114? No, you're not accredited. So what does accredited mean? It means wealthy, right? Usually an American could only invest in index funds and that's it. This is deeply unfair. The wealthy have access to profitable instruments, while the poor only have access to the most modest ones. Well, they say it's the poor person's own fault. Yes, but we're democratic socialists. How can that be? It's the exact opposite of what they claim. Now, this market is opening up for ordinary retirement accounts. This means your retirement can grow faster. This means that the capital which used to be locked in the hands of a small group of professional investors is now starting to work for tens of millions of people. This is the democratization of wealth. Real democratization, not propaganda, without renaming, without quotas, through mechanisms that we call the market. The administration claims that illegal border crossings have dropped to their lowest level in decades. That's true. These are real, measurable achievements confirmed by independent sources. From the science of freedom's perspective, there's no contradiction. Galambos distinguished two levels of rights: primary rights to one's own life, one's own freedom, one's own property, and procedural rules by which society operates, so that primary rights are not violated. No one has the right to violate the border of a sovereign state. Well, just like no one has the right to enter your home without your consent. A border is like the home of an extended household. Letting someone in or not is the owner's decision, not the visitor's. But here, as a scientist, I am obliged to tell the whole truth, not just the convenient half. An analysis by the Cato Institute, a highly respected classical liberal organization, shows that along with the decrease in illegal immigration, legal immigration also dropped sharply by 132,000 people per month less than before. The refugee program has been reduced, I think, many times over. The H-1B visa is burdened with thousands of dollars in fees, and the humanitarian parole for Ukrainians has been closed. This is no longer a fight against illegals. This is shutting the doors for legal immigrants. Adam Smith wrote in The Wealth of Nations, "A man who is deprived of the freedom to move where his labor is needed is like a man who has had half his legs taken away." Legal immigration is an influx of capital, knowledge, and energy. Soviet immigrants, in my opinion, built half of Silicon Valley's engineering. Indian engineers built the other half. Killing legal immigration means killing Silicon Valley. The American spirit, American dynamism, that very dynamism that the administration is so proud of in other chapters of the report. That's why my assessment is mixed, and I hope intellectually honest. Closing the border to illegal crossings is an achievement, but making legal pathways worse is a mistake. Maybe it's not a mistake, but a shortcoming. But this needs attention. The administration still has time to fix it, and I hope they will. Because we need smart, highly skilled, business-oriented, quick and resourceful immigrants. The third chapter of the report is about American trade policy, above all tariffs. And here I must, as a person who tries to study science, real science, volitional science, what I am telling you, I want to tell the truth, which perhaps some of my viewers may not like. A tariff is a tax. The tariff is not paid by the Chinese, the Mexicans, or the Europeans who send goods to us. The tariff is paid by you, the American consumer. When a 25% tariff is imposed on a Chinese washing machine, the washing machine doesn't get cheaper, it gets more expensive. Well, by 25, 20, or 15%, the exact number doesn't matter right now, it just becomes more expensive. The money doesn't go to Beijing, the money goes to Washington's treasury, I understand. Bastiat wrote his famous petition of the candle makers in 1845. It's a satirical text in which the candle makers appeal to the government to ban the sun because it unfairly competes with their products. Sure, it's funny, absurd, and so on, but it precisely describes the logic of any protectionist, without exception. Adam Smith proved 250 years ago that trade between two countries is not a zero-sum game. Both countries benefit because each specializes in what it does more efficiently. A tariff eliminates specialization. A tariff makes everyone poorer, including those it supposedly protects. If tariffs remain a permanent tax machine, it will be the biggest economic mistake of this administration, which will devalue many of its real achievements. Well, now that I've said all this, I have to present the arguments of the other side. If your partner acts the same way you do, then that's fair, and in that case, duty-free trade is a huge benefit for everyone. If your partner uses your naivety as an opportunity to kill production in your country and through dumping and other tricks, causes your enterprises to go bankrupt, your workers to be laid off, and investments to leave, then this must never be allowed. This is already the beginning of a struggle. This is what's called the country's economic security. When you interact with a deceiver, a fraudster, with people on the other side who are trying their best to play the game where he wins and you lose, instead of everyone winning, then you need to put up a barrier to such an exchange so that your partner feels even more uncomfortable, even worse than you do as a result of the actions he started. And you are forced to take those measures as well. It can be painful along the way, yes. Along the way, there may be a loss of purchasing power. Well, not a loss, of course, but a decrease. But this is used as a tool to achieve honest, duty-free, mutually respectful trade relations. Another point that needs to be considered: your country must produce everything it needs for national security, even if this requires setting up barriers, either banning or making imports more expensive. Otherwise, at the most inconvenient moment, they will cut off the necessary materials and easily strangle you. But this is probably the only exception to the rule. Here you have it, the science of freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not propaganda, this is analysis. The Trump administration has two souls. One is liberal, in the classical political sense of the word. Like Rand Hayek Mises. That's deregulation, tax reform, abolishing DEI, criticizing ESG, freeing up energy, opening up capital to ordinary people, restoring meritocracy. It's insanely important. These are huge real achievements. Trump's first year, the first year of his administration, did more for freedom than the previous 20 or even 30 years. This needs to be acknowledged directly. The other side is protectionist. These are tariffs, attempts to manage supply chains from Washington, and the strangling of legal immigration alongside the legitimate restriction of illegal immigration. Our task, the task of people who understand the science of freedom, is not to become either fans of the administration or its enemies. Our task is to support the first side and honestly criticize the second. To remain analyst. To look not at party labels, but at the direction things are moving and what that can bring to our society and our country. All these people whom I often quote: Bastiat, Mises, Hayek, Friedman, Rand, Galambos, Adam Smith, Thomas Paine, Isaac Newton, by the way. This is our compass. When politics points north toward freedom, we support it, even if it's not our party. When it turns south toward coercion, we warn against it, even if it's our own party. This is the only honest position. The only one that doesn't depend on elections, on ratings, or on the whims of those in power. Freedom, ladies and gentlemen, does not belong to any party. Freedom belongs to those who understand it and those who defend it. Now, if you found this analysis helpful, click the bell. It's free and you'll be the first to get new videos. And if you're ready to support independent analysis without ads or sponsors, a subscription to the channel is $4 a month. This gives me the opportunity to keep doing what I do without worrying about the political climate. Write in the comments which of the 8 achievements you consider the most important. By the way, I'm really interested in what people, my viewers, think about this, and which of the mistakes you consider the most dangerous in the long run. We'll discuss it in the next video. And now, as I promised, Snezhana, wonderful, amazing, kind, and fair.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel, for example? Is the war either in Iran or in Ukraine close to some kind of conclusion?
But on what grounds are they asking Snezhana about the end of wars? Let's read what she writes about herself. Snezhana Yegorova, actress, TV host, writer, public figure, human rights activist. She defends people's rights, and mother of 5 children. Oh, and also the author of TV and radio projects. I think the fact that she is the mother of 5 children is exactly what gives her the right to discuss global topics. Honestly, if she had 7 children, she would discuss them even better.
Well, look, I think, Alexander, that there is a very concise definition for everything you've described. I came up with it. It's called the 4th Jew. Well, I mean, we see that from some unified center, which we can't clearly define. And so far we can't quite catch it by the tail and roughly speaking name names. Yes, there is some kind of global worldwide process that covers almost all the key points with its network.
I want to say right away, Snezana, you're lucky. You say that you can't name the last names, first names, dates, and places where these so-called masters of the universe gather. And I'll reveal a secret to you now, because for everything you've done, you deserve to be rewarded. I can't even say it out of respect for you. For example, I'm Jewish. I'll admit it right away. Yes, I'm Jewish. Well, I think it's pretty obvious on the screen, too. Why did you call it the fourth, then? The fourth U-Reich? I think we never stopped, so this is the first and only U-Reich, and not the fourth at all. Ever since the times when we ourselves destroyed the Second Temple in order to disperse around the world and rule it, we have constantly organized pogroms against ourselves. We persuaded the leaders of Christian countries to spread rumors that we put the blood of Christian infants into matzo, persuaded monarchs of many countries to expel us, to ban us, to forbid us from having families, to forbid us many things that were allowed to people of other nationalities and faiths. So all this time we were controlling the world in order to ultimately stage a huge spectacle called the Holocaust. Well, that is so that everyone would believe that we don't control the world, but on the contrary, that we are miserable and poor. Well, you are absolutely right. We Jews really do control the world. But what's insanely important to know is that we are controlled by our wives. Because in a real Jewish family, the husband is responsible for important things. For example, at my house, I decide whether it was right or wrong for Iran to attack Iraq, or whether the Sumerians should be considered the ancestors of our civilization, and my wife decides all the unimportant questions because they are absolutely unimportant, like where we should live, where to go, where to vacation, how to raise the kids. Sometimes when my wife leaves, she lets me be the head of the house. I don't always take advantage of it since I could get used to it. Snezana, it's all very simple. The best at managing Jews are non-Jewish wives. If a Jew marries a non-Jewish wife, you can say that at the same time he's already under her thumb. These non-Jewish wives often change so much that it seems like they're actually Jewish women, while their husbands are just props. So that walking in high heels, she has someone to lean on.
Well, that is Israel represented by Bibi Netanyahu. In this case, his political party conducted an experiment in their own country, as it seemed to me, with the economic, psychological, and cultural life of their own people. As we know, Bibi Netanyahu is involved in a large number of cases related to his economic crimes, his corruption, and other matters. Apparently, he doesn't regret any of this for even a second, and in order to avoid punishment, he starts a war.
What a subtle and accurate observation. For example, of course, Bibi convinced Hamas to attack Israel, to kill 1,200 people, take 251 hostages, torture them, rape them, beat them, all just to distract from the fact that he accepted a gift, 2 boxes of cigars. He smoked them himself instead of giving them to the state treasury. What a son of a bitch. The state of Israel could have taken those 2 boxes, sold them, and used the money to feed 2 or 3 Palestinian families for the next 7 years. And he came up with the war against Iran by giving them enriched uranium, because he wanted to distract the public from the fact that he had promised legislative support to the newspaper Latest News in Hebrew, that's Idiota Horonot, who constantly criticize him, hate him, and look for any excuse to attack him. So he promised them legislative help to become the only monopoly newspaper in Israel. Well, who is behind Newsmax, American News Online, and Fox like Donald Trump is? He would have made a deal with CNN that he would help them gain popularity, while at the same time he would legislate to prevent their competitors from criticizing Trump and calling him an idiot, a loser, a traitor to the country, and the worst scoundrel, Snezana. You truly were a snow avalanche, Snezana.
And which has one main task, which Trump is fulfilling. This is directly related to Israel and its desire to take a leading position, to become a kind of regional hegemon in the Middle East. And what I have been talking about for many years is that Ukraine was a testing ground for them, where they practice these technologies. USAID, all these Soros organizations, all these so-called NGOs, all these companies, Renaissance and others, who came in, these white gentlemen with cheerful white-toothed smiles with porcelain teeth, and with those sly squints, who were creating a democratic society, civil rights and freedoms, who they really needed, who supported all sorts of people like Sternenko, Pritula, and before them there were a huge number of different, so to speak, fans of the Western way of life. All of this was done in Ukraine to see how these psychological, economic, and cultural expansions would work. I mean, we've already been through all of this. It's from the same, let's say, hen house that all those same wolves came from, the ones who are pressuring Ukraine, and they're definitely pressuring the Middle East too. So they're acting like, several tentacles of the same octopus. It's all coming from a single center. That's why it's called a Jew.
Pay attention to Sheelest's disturbingly knowing expression. That's the host. I think if not an Oscar, then at least a banana leaf is guaranteed for him.
The British Crown, which basically is also behind it, that's the city. And there sits Rothschild and all sorts of his fellow tribesmen who are engaged in forming and creating the world's fourth Jew. Well, I mean, it's absolutely obvious by now. How can anyone pretend it's not? And of course, they will go further. Rostov-Kursk, what's next? Belgorod, which one is next? Voronezh, Pskov.
Well, Voronezh, if we're talking about the so-called Khazar Khaganate that existed, then around Voronezh, that's about where its northern border was, and also the Caspian Sea. Thank you, Snezana. Everything you're talking about sounds dramatic and even pessimistic. I hope that's not the case, because if it is, then it turns out... Is that so? I hope that's not the case, because then it turns out the special military operation has different goals. I really hope that's not the case.
So he kind of hopes that's not the case, but unfortunately he feels, sees, senses, and understands that it is. And that the Jews are taking over the world. Hold on. But they've already taken over a long time ago and are in charge. Why would they be taking over again? Maybe some Jews are taking over the world from other Jews. That's probably how it is. I can't cloud your mind any better than snow avalanches. Maybe only a snow avalanche, one I haven't experienced yet. That's all. And I hope we will live to see Tuesday when our next meeting will take place. And until then, many good positive events. This was Leon Vainstein, The Science of Freedom. Goodbye.